This episode is brought to you by Nerds Gummy Clusters, the sweet treat that always elevates the vibe. With a sweet gummy surrounded with tangy, crunchy nerds, every bite of Nerds Gummy Clusters brings you a whole new world of flavor. Whether it's game night, on the way to a concert, or kicking back with your crew, unleash your senses with Nerds Gummy Clusters.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. From streaming to shopping, Prime helps you get more out of your passions. So whether you're a fan of true crime or prefer a nail-biting novel from time to time, with services like Prime Video, Amazon Music, and fast free delivery, Prime makes it easy to get more out of whatever you're into or getting into. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. During tax season, your personal info travels to a lot of places. Between payroll, your tax consultant, and the IRS. If your W-2 gets exposed, that's just the ticket for identity thieves. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it guaranteed or your money back. Don't let identity thieves take you for a ride. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Welcome to
4Kids Flashback. Hello and welcome to 4Kids Flashback. My name is Tara Sands. I'm joined by...
My name is Steve Yurko. I
Sounded
realize
like
you always
confession.
say my name is, so I thought like, oh, are we changing it up? But
I like it's a little different every week. Welcome to the show. It's a show where we go behind the scenes of if it's your first time tuning in. We go behind the scenes of the shows that were made by 4Kids, which was the company that brought shows like Pokémon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And Shaman King and One Piece and Funky Cops and Magical Do-Re-Mi and others to English-speaking audiences. It's a deep dive. It's the good, the bad, and the weird. We're getting to talk to the creators and the actors and the blah, blah, blahs. And today we have a different angle on it all. Someone who watched these shows and was very, knew the Pokemon games very well and has made a career out of her love of Pokemon. So we're going to talk to Tama Hero today. But before that, Steve, do you see what I'm wearing?
let it be known to the listener that Tara's wearing a 4Kids Flashback t-shirt with the logo.
That Steve designed.
That I
Steve designed this logo.
Created, yes.
Yeah.
It is on the shirt.
I had
color.
a little it's a cool looking shirt, and I have this habit of like just on a whim like cutting the necklines of my shirt, and I did it really uneven today, and then I had to like keep cutting and cutting. Yeah. So it might be
I'm the opposite. Tighter neck for me.
You want a tight neck?
Yes. I don't know.
Tight neck Yurko.
Yeah. Tight ass and tight.
You like your asses?
No. I'm a tight ass. I was gonna say.
Oh, you're a tight ass. Okay,
yeah.
that's
no, my ass is
that's better.
Not tight at all.
So you like a tight neck tee?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Form fitting.
Okay.
Looks nice. Looks for me. On me.
It looks neater.
Neater. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what my problem is. But, speaking of clothing, this is a good segue. So I was at a convention over the weekend, and I was working with someone, and they pointed to this older gentleman, and they said, is he supposed to be Mario? And he very much was not intentionally dressed as Mario. He was an older fellow with blue overalls and a red t-shirt. And it was adorable, but like he definitely had no idea that maybe he could have been mistaken for being in cosplay.
He wasn't a casual Santa or anything?
No, he was not a casual Santa. And no. I was obsessed, and I was like, I wonder if there's an Instagram account for like cosplay by accident. And there was not, so I started it.
You did?
I started an Instagram account called Cosplay by Accident, and I covered up his face.
Okay,
But
at least
I definitely. Oh yeah.
give these people their privacy at least.
Oh my gosh, no. So, if you see any accidental cosplays out in the wild, go to Cosplay by Accident and
Surely
send me pictures.
probably in like West Hollywood, you're bound to see someone dressed in something that looks like cosplay.
Yeah, So it has to look like a specific character. Like I'm sure it happens with like the South Park characters all the time.
Oh yeah,
Right? Yeah.
just get one of those matching beanies, and
Totally.
that's half the work right there.
But like it's almost like have you ever accidentally like worn a red t-shirt to Target and you're like, "Oh man, everyone's going to ask me for help." You know what I mean? It's like one of those things.
I feel like I've worn non-red t-shirts at Target, and people thought I worked there, and I don't get it.
But did you pretend you did and just send them to the wrong aisle at least?
I think I just had to like help them get something. I don't know, or I can't remember. I just know I've been like confused for an employee in a Target. And I like look down again because sometimes when people say like, "Oh, nice shirt," and then I completely forgot what the hell I was even wearing in the first place, and I have to double check. I was definitely not wearing red.
Interesting.
Wore a navy blue shirt one time, and I think someone was talking to me like as if I was a police officer, and I'm like,
Oh.
I was on break from my cartoon job. I didn't understand that either. But,
You should have made a citizen's arrest at that point.
I don't want to contribute.
Okay, fine. Well, yeah. So that's the shenanigans I was up to this weekend, starting new Instagram pages for no good reason.
Productive.
Yeah, super productive. I don't want to brag. I have 3 followers. I am one of them.
So you have 2 followers.
I have 2. But I am blowing up. It's gonna be huge.
Unreal.
Steve is shaking his head at me. I think he's disgusted.
It was that long of a weekend, huh?
Yeah, it was a little bit like that. But yeah, so more importantly, that we have an Instagram account for this show. And there's all these places you can subscribe, rate, and review. Subscribe, rate, and review. Remember that song I wrote? If you like the podcast, you know what to do.
I'm trying not to even snap my
Subscribe,
fingers
rate,
because
review.
it's just not going to be in sync. So,
That's true.
There's a delay.
Not with the delay. Yeah. We said delay at the same time, though. Yeah, so where should they go, Steve?
Go to 4kidsflashback.com. That's in the URL. Use the number 4, not the word 4. There we'll have links for everything, like wherever we're at on social media, where to listen to the podcast, link to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/4kidsflashback. Same old thing. And if you love the show so much, you could pitch in. You could get episodes a week free, ad early, and plus other content.
Oh, you did it.
Yeah.
You did it.
I'm good.
A week free.
Oh, I did the
Ad
thing
ear-
again?
You did. I love when you do that.
I hate myself.
No, I love it. It makes me so happy.
Week early, ad free. Get access to our Discord too.
Oh, and also follow the links to buy show merch, and you can get this shirt I'm wearing with Steve's
the
logo.
aforementioned shirt.
Yeah. Sorry I cut you off. I just got excited.
No,
it's
it's
my
okay.
favorite thing.
I'm like, no, I'm good. I
Notes.
had it, but I guess not. It's just
I love it.
my Berenstain Bears thing, I guess.
Our guest has entered the Zoom waiting room, so we will be right back. Our guest today is Tama Hero. In 2008, she started streaming on YouTube, mostly hacking Pokémon games. At that time, she was known as Tamashi Hiroka. Her amazing videos and artwork gained her massive attention. Her focus and her videos have changed over the years, but Pokémon always has a very strong presence. And we really wanted to diversify this podcast with people who maybe didn't work at 4Kids, because you were definitely not old enough to have done that. It would have been broken every child labor law in the world. But so people who were influenced by these shows and who maybe have made a career out of their fandom. So thank you so much for being here, Tama Hero.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Me and my sister used to mimic your voice when you were growing up. So,
I loved seeing little kids do that, and it's still one of my favorite things. How good at it do you think you were?
Oh, we were really good at doing voices when we were kids. We were called the Rugrats Queens at our elementary school because we used to copy every cartoon we saw. But obviously, I'm 30 now, so I can't do it anymore.
But I bet you could do the Bulbasaur better now than you could then.
I would have to learn to do it from scratch.
Okay. Well, maybe that'll be our follow-up interview where you do all your voices again.
Okay. You can coach me.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That would be fun, actually. So from what I read, you were in first grade when Pokemon kind of exploded onto the scene.
Yes, I was.
What was your first taste of Pokemon?
So it was kind of like, first grade is sort of my first memory of pop culture existing. Like, I don't remember anything before that, but when we started going to elementary school and we were around a lot of other kids, we were introduced to a lot of stuff that we didn't know about before. And some boys in my kindergarten class were playing Pokemon on the playground, and they were pretending to be Pokemon trainers. And, back then you'd just be like, oh, can I play? And they'd be like, yeah, you can be Pikachu. And I'm like, what's a Pikachu? So they told me it's like a little yellow mouse. And that was my first memory of what Pokemon was. And then eventually it just sort of was everywhere. Like, we got the tapes, we used to watch it on the WB. This was like, the anime was our first entry point into Pokemon, and then the trading cards. And then when I was a little bit older, like maybe a year older, I got the Game Boy games.
And the artwork, I think, is what initially brings kids in. What was it for you? I mean, as an artist yourself, like, what was the thing that you're like, this is my show now?
I've sort of been thinking about this, and I think maybe Pokemon has appeal to different people for different reasons, because it's such a big series and there's so many different aspects that people enjoy about it. For me, I think I really liked that it was about animals, and I was a big animal person, and I was a big stuffed animal person. And I kind of feel like Pokemon kind of fill that same role for kids, where it's like you have your animal, like your transitional object, and you're independent and going out on all these adventures with no adults, no school. I think that was what I loved about it.
Yeah. Was there a character that spoke to you that you were like, I want to be the blank if I was like to role play, or like the Jessie, or the I don't know, I just forgot his name. Gary. Did you want to be Gary? No, no one wanted to be Gary.
Well, I think Misty obviously would have been my favorite, since she was the girl. And that was one of the things I liked about Pokemon, because growing up, there were not that many cartoons with like a main female character that actually did things.
Yeah.
So I think that Misty was like a really cool role model for me. And then also, one of the things that's really fun about Pokemon is that you can imagine yourself as a Pokemon trainer. So you didn't have to imagine being like a character from the show. You could just be like, I'm a Pokemon trainer and I have a Meowth. Right. And that's more or less what we would all do.
Yeah. I don't want to give away too many things about your life, because I want people to go to your YouTube channel and watch these amazing videos about your life that I watched with your incredible artwork. So we're going to talk about you growing up a little bit, but I really want to, and I'll put your links in the show notes, and I really want to encourage people to go and watch all of these things if they haven't already. But I've talked to so many kids at conventions who turned to Pokemon when things got tough, or that is the way they related to other children. Maybe they had no common ground, but if they took out their Pokemon cards, they didn't have to talk, they could just play the cards. Or was that similar to your experience?
Yeah. So growing up, I was from a dysfunctional family, and I had a learning disability that was more or less like totally unaccommodated. So I was really struggling with school, and I felt alone a lot of the time. But with Pokemon, it was so easy. It was just, you had the cards, you had the game, you could easily connect to other people, trade Pokemon. I remember we used to watch the tapes with our friends in elementary school, and my younger neighbors couldn't read yet. So with Island of the Giant Pokemon, the episode where the Pokemon are talking and there's like the subtitles on the bottom, it would be like I would read to them so that they like it was a way we could connect, and I could like share that with them. And yeah, so I guess that's really nice about it. And also, like, as I got older and I got connected to the Pokemon community online, it became this huge resource for me to connect with people. And I've made so many relationships because of the series that I wouldn't have otherwise. Like I became interested in Japanese culture because of the series and started taking Japanese, and that's where I met my husband. And
Wow.
yeah, and he originally came up to me because I was playing my 3DS in class, and he's like, "So we're going to battle later." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Our eyes met, didn't they?"
Wow. Smooth.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this so much. Oh. And that's what's so interesting too, is like there's this online component to it, but Pokemon's been really smart. Like with Pokemon Go, what was that resurgence of Pokemon like for you as somebody who had probably, like, a lot of people had lost interest in Pokemon over the years, and then all of a sudden it was back. How did that affect you?
Oh, that was amazing. That was a renaissance. It was really exciting that everyone cared about it, and it was connecting everybody. And you could go out, and I would go out and do the community days at my local park and meet people. And yeah, it was really awesome. I still play Pokemon Go all the time with my friends and my husband.
Oh, I love hearing that. Okay, so I jumped way ahead to Pokemon Go because I got excited. But 2008 comes along. You're just an expert at the landscape of YouTube and the changes in it over the years. So what got you on there in the first place? And then we can go into like the changes in your content and all that kind of stuff. But what was the first video you made?
Okay, so it was actually in 2006 is when I first joined
YouTube. Sorry.
That's okay.
I have it there, but I was thinking 18 years you were streaming. Okay, I lied. Everybody, I lied. She was on in 2006.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah, so I was 13 at the time. I sort of became aware of Pokemon on the internet because so in the original games, there's a glitch called Missing Now. And it was like a playground rumor, but it was really in the game. It was something that you could do. Like there was an incorrect placeholder or something that kind of allowed you to duplicate items. And you ran into this glitchy chair-shaped Pokemon that was out over the coast of Cinnabar Island. And I first heard about it at like a pool party at my church. And there was this older boy who was like, yeah, there's this creepy glitch Pokemon. And that freaked me out. So I went home and I looked it up online. And I found this site called TRS Rockin', which is like this really popular Pokemon fan site. Back in the day, it was run by a woman named Mandy Nader, who was like an adult Pokemon fan in the 90s. And there was all this stuff on there about the Pokemon anime. And that was kind of like my first awareness that Pokemon was kind of a localized product that wasn't just like that it came from an original version. And that made me super fascinated with the original version that you couldn't find anywhere. Like all that was available was the dub. Mm-hmm. So I used to look, like you couldn't find video very easily back then.
Not then, no.
No, but I could find music from the show in Japanese. So that's what I originally joined YouTube for, was that people would post the songs from the original show there.
I think that's one of the first things I did when I discovered YouTube, was immediately like, I was like, okay, what anime out there had dub openings and not their Japanese openings? And I want to know what those were like. And I remember I remember like Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically just going and seeing like, oh, what were these like? So I can relate for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So actually my very first account was probably in 2005 when the site was brand new, and I was making Pokemon AMVs, and then ShowPro shut me down.
Busted.
Back then there was no appeal process for copyright material. I was 13. I had no idea what copyright was.
You didn't have a lawyer? You didn't lawyer up at 13?
No. So they shut down my very first channel, and then I made a new one, which is the one that I have now. And I originally made these ROM hack videos because I was determined to make my own Pokemon game at 13. And I kind of figured out how to do ROM hacking from like looking into bootleg Pokemon games and how those were made. And so I made those for a long time. And then I switched over to kind of what I do now in 2011-ish when I became a partner. So that like there was kind of a gray area back then whether or not you could monetize game footage. So I switched over to something that would be like less dependent on just having the game footage on the screen. And then I made a video about the myths and rumors about green version because I don't know if you're super familiar with the video games.
Steve is more than I am.
To an extent, I'm definitely the second most well-versed here. So, but this it all makes sense to me so far. So yeah, I'm familiar.
Okay, so in Japan, there's Red and Green are the first two Pokemon games, and when they localized them here, they made Red and Blue. So people were really interested in like, well, what was Green version like? We never got Green version, and back then it was like impossible to find any reliable information on the internet. So I went through all the fan sites and found things that weren't true, and went through my copy of Green version and like showed like, no, it's actually like this. Yeah, that was my first video that's still on my channel. Oh, no. In 2011, I would have been in my senior year of high school.
Okay, I was like, wait a second. This is okay. But still young to be like figuring this out, especially because I don't, and maybe I'm wrong, correct me, I don't think at that time it was very kid heavy on YouTube. It wasn't like unboxing videos were a thing yet, you know?
Right, yeah. I mean, I think probably mostly kids were using it, but kids were not usually the ones making videos.
Right.
Yeah. But there was kind of like an unserved niche, and I had a complete lack of supervision and was on the internet all the time. So I was making Pokemon content like for other people my own age.
Still getting around to that fix on your car? You got this. On eBay, you'll find millions of parts guaranteed to fit. Doesn't matter if it's a major engine repair or your first time swapping your windshield wipers. eBay has that part you need, ready to click perfectly into place for changes big and small. Loud or quiet, find all the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. But you already know that. eBay. Things, people, love. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Which Manning brother will win the FanDuel Kick of Destiny 3 on Super Bowl Sunday? Peyton or Eli? Watch the showdown live on Super Bowl Sunday. Plus, new customers bet $5 and get $200 if your bet wins. Only on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
21 plus and present in Virginia. Must be first online real money wager. $5 deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
So, like, you had actually like acquired like a cartridge of like green version, like imported, or was this just research you were doing on your own?
Yeah, well, back then it was actually really cheap to buy Pokemon games because no one wanted them, or no one with a disposable income, like no adults wanted them. So I got a very cheap copy on eBay. Yeah,
nice. Yeah, because I'm curious what the whole capturing process is like when you're going off of a handheld. I'm sure I could probably, but I'm like, so like, were you actually like hooking it up to like a computer and getting like screen caps and video and all that to just be like hard evidence, like is what it is, or was it just more like holding it up to the camera and be like, look?
Back then it was very primitive, so I was like playing it on a Game Boy Advance SP with the like backlit screen and just pointing my digital camera at it. Now I have kind of more of a advanced setup that captures it like the video feed from a console. But yeah.
So because you mentioned localization, it's something that obviously comes up a lot on a podcast about 4Kids. So, and so Steve was one of the teenagers watching some of these shows like One Piece and who knew what the original manga was and all the changes happening to these shows. Once you started finding the original Pokemon and maybe other shows, were you shocked at all the changes 4Kids had made to the music? I mean, you mentioned the music specifically. Like, what was your reaction to some of these shows that you grew up with?
Well, for Pokemon in particular, I was actually kind of surprised how little was changed.
Okay.
Because some of the other shows that I was into at the time were like Sailor Moon, which had a lot of changes to the source material.
Yeah.
But Pokemon, like the actors that they picked were all very close to their Japanese counterparts. They changed the names, but some of them were direct translations or like similar sounding names that fit. And then there were just like 3 episodes of the original season that didn't make it to air here.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And it was all for stuff that made total sense, like the seizure episode or right.
Yeah, you can't show that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or like the amount of guns in them. Like, yes, that made sense that they wouldn't want to localize that. But no, they were really pretty good about it. I think what was weird to me was that the Japanese version wasn't available when it was for some other shows. So like a lot of shows that I watched, the dub would air on TV, like Sailor Moon, and then you would buy the tapes or the DVD, and those would have the option for Japanese audio with subtitles. But Pokemon never had that. So it was like kind of a mysterious thing that you just couldn't watch the original anywhere. I don't know if that's still true, but it was back then.
That's a good question. That's an interesting point, and I'm sure that was not a haphazard thing. I'm sure that was very much discussed and talked about why they didn't want to make that available. But yeah, I mean, so what about like shows like Yu-Gi-Oh? Were you into any of like the Yu-Gi-Ohs or any of that other stuff, or was it Pokemon and Sailor Moon focused?
So Pokemon was like really my entry point into anime. And then I did watch some of the other 4Kids shows like Yu-Gi-Oh! And I really got into manga when I was in middle school because it was so anime was kind of expensive back then. Like you could watch what was on TV, but if you wanted to buy tapes or DVDs, like most stores wouldn't have that much to choose from. And it would be like $60 for 3 episodes. So I would read manga instead because my friends and I would each buy like 1 volume of a series and then like trade them around. And it was only $10 a volume. So most of my anime exposure came through manga. And the manga that was really popular when I was in middle school was Tokyo Mew Mew, which was adapted into Mew Mew Power. So my friends and I would all wake up at the crack of dawn on Saturday to try and watch Mew Mew Power.
Oh.
Yeah.
Have you since watched it in Japanese and English?
I have, yeah.
Okay.
That was another show that I don't think they ever put on DVD here in its original language, but yeah.
Probably not.
No,
yeah, that's
I
interesting.
believe not.
So something else I want to ask you about being an early streamer, being a female in this space and how that has, I'm sure it was unique then. Has that changed? Well,
yeah, I think it has changed quite a bit, but gaming in general, like the demographic of maybe gaming and then shonen anime, which I think is what Pokemon is considered, is definitely more geared towards like boys. So I am kind of a minority in the space, but there's definitely more women doing it now than there used to be, especially streaming. And I think part of that is just because the industry overall has shifted kind of more to general audiences and it's become accessible for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have advice for people about staying safe online? Because I love how open you are about your struggles, about your life, all this stuff. But there's a price that sometimes comes with that people feel like they know you. You know, they feel like you're their best friend. How did you manage to stay safe? What advice do you have for people doing this to stay safe?
Well, I was kind of forward thinking as a 13-year-old and I picked a pen name. Tama's not my real name. And I've put in some effort to try and make, a boundary there so that my private life and my public facing life online aren't bleeding together too much. And I guess it depends on how young we're talking. Like if you're a kid, your parents should probably know what you're doing on the internet, or if you're an adult.
Hopefully, but not always. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's only so much you could do at the end of the day. Like, you can put in the effort to put up barriers between yourself and other people. But if there's someone who's really determined, then, all you can do is try and protect yourself. But it's ultimately not really your fault.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if you realize this, and I assume the name Tama did not come from the 4Kids show Tama and Friends.
Right.
So is there a character that it's inspired by?
So this is really embarrassing. As a
Perfect.
kid.
We love that.
So I played a lot of online games as a kid, and one of them was RuneScape. And my account name on RuneScape was Moon's Soul. And soul in Japanese is Tamashi. So when I went to make my YouTube channel and my pen name, I was a big weeb, as they say, and I picked Tamashi as my first name because it had good search engine optimization. Like, it wasn't being used by anything else at the time. Now it is. But and then as I got older, I got kind of embarrassed that I was using Japanese pen name still, and now I'm 30, so I've kind of truncated it and made it a little bit less derivative. But yeah.
Okay, I don't find that embarrassing at all. We did have some questions from fans, but something else I would love to ask you about is we talk about like nostalgia on this show so much and how strong it is. And I mean, I'd love to get a psychologist on and understand the serotonin that's released when we see these characters from our youth. But is there, to you, what your opinion, obviously you're not a psychiatrist, a healthy amount of fandom? Like, where, you've made a living doing this, so it's your job now too. So it's very healthy because this is your career. Do you think there's a healthy amount of fandom? Do you meet people where you say, hey, maybe a little less with the games? Or
well, no, I mean, I think Pokemon, so the original concept for Pokemon came from the video games. It was just developed by Game Freak, and the concept came from Satoshi Tajiri, who was inspired by like catching bugs in the forest in his hometown. And then it sort of, as that area became more urbanized, he was like, well, I want kids to be able to experience what I had growing up, so I'm going to make a game about that idea. So I think kind of like nostalgia and that sentiment is kind of like baked into the idea of Pokemon, like at its core. It's kind of about childhood and living through that and like preserving the joy,
the innocence, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and also I kind of think like that can be good for us too. Like going back to what we liked as children and as they say, taking care of our inner child. So I kind of, my philosophy on it is, if it makes you happy and it's not hurting anybody, then you should just indulge in it and really don't care about what anybody else thinks, because at the end of the day, you only have like one trip around the sun. So you should really spend it doing what you want to do. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I don't know are you someone that goes to a lot of conventions and sees this firsthand, or are you more staying at home in front of your computer doing videos? Like, what's your fandom?
I used to do a lot more conventions, sort of like in the days before COVID. I'm definitely more of like an online type person. I spend a lot of my life online, and I primarily engage that way. But I guess I don't see a lot of it in person, but I kind of wish I did. Like, it would be nice to have more people in my life that liked it on the same level as I did. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and it's so interesting. I could do a Pokemon trivia contest a lot at conventions, and the amount that people know is astounding. And I mean, I'd love you to be a contestant one day. I think you'd sweep the floor with that. But
you might have to write the questions.
Yeah, you might have to write the question. Yeah, that's true. Well, the person who first won, I then hired to help me write questions because he was so good.
Yeah.
But they say there's a region of your brain that's certain kids' brains that's dedicated to Pokemon information.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. Like growing up with as I mentioned earlier, I had the learning disability, and I was like, man, there's really just like nothing I'm good at except for Pokemon. Like there's the only thing that I excel at above other people that I could like use as a skill is this. I wish that I could like find a career to use this somehow. So I'm very lucky that I kind of made that happen. But yeah, I mean, Pokemon fans are really impressive. It's actually really hard to write Pokemon trivia questions. There's a local bar trivia in my area, and I also won a lot of them. And
I was sure you had.
Yeah, so I also help them write questions, and it is hard to kind of like find a balance between like the hardcore fans who really know everything, but not alienating to people who like kind of like it casually. Yeah. It's a very big series.
Well, the trick I found, because again, I was walking that kind of tightrope, and what I started to do was I let the audience ask questions. So once I did my questions, and then once they got involved, the questions varied and were all over the place, and it became way more fun for everybody. And like it still astounds me. There was a kid won the contest recently. And I looked at him, I go, do you do your homework? Like, how do you have time for anything else in your life? He was the sweetest kid. And I just ran into his mom randomly in Los Angeles. And it was so crazy. That is a tangent I didn't need to go on. Okay, let me ask you some of the questions from your fans.
Okay.
Because we did mention the music from Pokemon earlier, Blue Baron wants to know, were you ever surprised, bothered by the 4Kids dub changes, which we covered? But he says it still weirds me out that 4Kids started removing certain Japanese musical cues from later in their dubs when they had kept it earlier. I don't even actually know what he's talking about. Do you know what this is referring to?
Well, I think that you've actually talked to some of the people who did music for the show on the podcast already. I've been binging the podcast for the past week. So,
thank you. It's so sweet.
Yeah, but I think it was a licensing thing, right? Where the 4Kids stuff was then licensed in other territories around the world, so they would earn more revenue.
Yes,
from licensing their own. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense.
But as a viewer, did you notice that, or was that something that? Because I assume you seem to have great attention to detail.
Yeah, I mean, when I got really obsessed with like the Japanese version and the music from the Japanese version, I was actually kind of like, it would be like a really fun Easter egg if one of those songs was adapted or made it in. So I'd be like, oh, I know that one. Wow, they translated it to English, or. Right. And then also a lot of the music from the Japanese version is like based on the soundtrack from the game. So I think that would have been more noticeable just because we recognize those tunes. But yeah, otherwise, I don't think that it like background music would have bothered me personally. Okay. Yeah.
Hikari wants to know how you go about nicknaming your Pokemon.
Oh, it's really hard at this point. I have so many. I try to name all of them, but it's hard to come up with unique names. Pokemon Go, I just reuse the ones that I've already made in the series.
Okay, and it's easier now because now, like, if you can't think of anything right away, the game allows you to go back later.
Yeah, that's true.
I would get paralysis of choice when I was playing some of the older games because I felt compelled. I'm like, oh, you got to nickname everyone. But then I couldn't think of anything right away. I would just close the DS or something like that. And I'm like, oh, I'll think of it. I'll think on it. But at least it's gotten a lot easier. But I think at one point I had to stop because I started not remembering any new Pokemon in the generation. So for a while I was like, I got to actually retain this information.
Sometimes I'll just come up with a theme and then use that for a whole playthrough. So all the nicknames, it's easier to come up with like a category of something than it is to come up with individual names for like 30 Pokemon.
That's smart.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that tip. Okay. Pika Master 542, I guess 541 was taken, had a two-parter. Is there a Pokemon episode that really resonates with you? Something that maybe you saw yourself in, or an impactful episode for you?
Well, I really liked Island of the Giant Pokemon because it was something that I could share with my neighbors. And I also really liked Bye Bye Butterfree. I think every millennial is like a core memory for us. there are very few episodes of children's television that can like move you on that level. I think it's very emotional to watch, and it was a very good episode. And I also really liked Princess versus Princess, which is Misty and Jessie battling for the set of dolls. Because I really related to Misty a lot as a kid because she's like the youngest of her siblings and had to deal with her older sisters putting her down a lot and wanting to have nice things like they had. And yeah, I thought that was a really good episode.
I take it they weren't fans of Pokemon.
Oh, my sister?
Yes.
Well, she was in the beginning, but so most kids kind of reached a point where they outgrew the series. And for me, I felt that external pressure to do it, but I didn't have any like internal shame that drove me to like outgrow Pokemon. I was like, no, this makes me happy. I'm going to keep liking it. Yeah. So
I have an older brother as well, and he got blue originally, and then like he tapped out, and I was like the opposite. I went like all in. That's what happened sometimes. So like the people that would get me into something would like bow out like very quickly, and then but then they converted me, and then I was just like, I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm on my own here, but I'm going all in. So I get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And since you did mention Misty and Jessie, I don't want to not talk about Rachel Lillis, who, is a permanent voice in your head. And when she passed, obviously we were upset as her friends. But I thought about the many more hours the fans spent with her and the outpouring. I get very emotional when I talk about it. But are there characters in your life that just mean so much to you? I mean, I assume Misty, but there must be a lot of other characters since you're a gamer. And I know like with games specifically, it's a very intimate experience with these voices. What kinds of like... Sorry, I'm going to rephrase it. I got emotional. What other characters do you feel like you live with like that?
Well, Misty was a big one for me. I've already been over that. And then I learned how to read from a Pokemon easy reader book, like of the episode Meowth Goes West, or Go West Young Meowth.
Go West, yes, that's it. Yeah.
And so I've always really been attached to Meowth because it's like, I would not be literate if not for Meowth, and I loved how funny Meowth was in the cartoon. And
okay, so some of the other questions, Pika Master also wanted to know some top items from your collection. Apparently, of this amazing collection.
Yeah, I have a lot of Pokemon stuff. I do. I've got most of my favorites are Ash things. I got in 2006, there was the 10th anniversary Real Action Heroes, Ash and Pikachu, that they only made like 1,500 of. And I helped my neighbors move and earned the money to buy it on the website. And it's using the Real Action Heroes body. So it has like a 6-pack, which is totally weird.
Oh, that is very strange.
It is weird. And then I also have the Think Chip Ash figure, which is like, it goes with the battle stadium and it has all these recorded lines of dialogue on it. And I got that signed by Veronica Taylor at the Emerald City Comic Con a long time ago.
Oh, she's the best.
Yeah.
Did you freak out when you met her?
Oh, kind of. I mean, I get starstruck. So mostly I get really shy and quiet, but I had her sign this figure that has her voice recorded in it. And I had the batteries in at the time, and she was really surprised by it because it's very odd things that are in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she's the best. She's so good at putting people at ease, too, because I think so many people get nervous when they meet her. But she's got such a beautiful energy that I'm sure, like, within moments, you were coherent and fine. she's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you traveled to Japan before?
I had actually. I traveled in 2016. My husband was studying abroad there, so at the end of his trip, I joined him and spent a week there and then we're going back soon for our honeymoon.
Oh,
nice.
good.
Congrats.
Oh.
What have been some of your, because I know you didn't go there and not purchase some Pokemon stuff, so I'm curious what are some of your favorite purchases from Japan?
Well, actually, I got a few. We would go to the thrift stores there, and this was kind of like before there was really high demand for old Pokemon games. So we went to Book Off, and I got a in-box copy of Emerald there that had a bunch of event Pokemon on it, like because the events are probably easier to get to in Japan because of all the mixed use development. Like they would be held at malls and movie theaters, which are kind of harder for kids in the suburbs here to get to. But in like all the games that I got on that trip had like mythicals and stuff on them from like the movie events and things like that. So it was really exciting.
Ooh. And you're going to bring at least 2 extra suitcases this time to buy things, right?
Oh, yeah. We're super savvy. We're going to ship it back with Kuroneko.
Okay, good. Yeah, I went for the first time. I was with Lisa Ortiz, and I'm going to out her and say she had to buy another suitcase while we were there because she overdid it.
Yeah.
She got great stuff, but yeah. It's hard not to. Everything's so friggin' cute there.
It is.
Okay, some more fan questions. I know you said there weren't a lot of great female influences animation-wise growing up. Someone wants to know some other cool female characters from cartoons that you liked.
I really liked Blossom from the Powerpuff Girls. She was like a very justice-oriented leader type. I liked her a lot. Yes, and another redhead. Let's see.
I got to play her in the live-action commercial they made. I got to be dressed as Blossom. This was over 20 years ago.
During your Fridays days?
No, this was before I hosted Fridays. I auditioned for this promo for Cartoon Network, and they dressed us all up as Powerpuff Girls, and we shot in New York City. We ran through the streets of New York City as Powerpuff Girls.
I remember this promo, and you had to wear like there was the cat eye shades or the
and the big bow. I was one of those.
Oh, that's so funny. I've seen that commercial a million times. I didn't know that was you.
That was one of my favorite days of shooting ever. So most people didn't put that together. I mean, I was working on Pokemon at the time, but there wouldn't have been a way to know that. It was really fun. So Powerpuff Girls, what other kinds of female characters did you think were cool?
I liked Sailor Moon a lot. She was she also really liked video games and not going to school. A theme.
You're related.
Yeah. And hard to think on the spot of other ones, but along those lines, yeah. Superheroes.
Yeah. And there weren't enough back then. I mean, like, or especially like the way you liked Misty, there weren't ones that were kids. Like if you watched She-Ra, but that was like an adult. It didn't feel like you could be her. You know, it was a different kind of.
Or like on the Rugrats, there were like a couple girls, but one of them was the villain and the other one was like a twin with a boy. So she wasn't really like a full character. You know, so when we were playing the Rugrats and we were like pretending to be characters, we would have to pretend to be Tommy and Chucky because there weren't enough girls. So I always like to show that like gave us when we were playing on the playground enough girls that like there could be more than one girl.
I think like going back to what we were talking about earlier was what was great about Pokemon. And I think I'm sensing a pattern with a lot of the Japanese shows we were getting in the States, but it's a lot of you could put yourself into it. Like you don't have to play an existing character. You could be like, oh, I'm this Pokemon trainer and this is my starter. And the only thing I could think of like earlier than that maybe is like Power Rangers, where it's kind of like you could just pretend to be like another Power Ranger. I think
I'm the fuchsia Power Ranger. You could be any color you wanted. Yeah.
I think like I don't know how you guys feel about this, but it feels like the Japanese side of like creative kind of just understands that a little bit more. And I think it continues to this day. I still see a lot of like properties that come out of there that blow up. And I think like in the States, I don't know, like stuff like Harry Potter, I guess is kind of like that. But I think that, it struck at it mastered that. And I think it's the reason why Pokemon is just more, isn't just like it's a boys property now. It's a all encompassing, mass appeal.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that was, I think that was also like one of the reasons the toys were so appealing was that it was like you could role play with your plastic Pokeball and
Right.
So were you getting those like that original lineup, like the Hasbro, the little minifigures that they imported?
Oh yeah, everything. We got the Pokeball blaster, like the one that's shaped like a Game Boy and has like a thing that you pop out for some reason. And we had all those Burger King Pokeballs and the keychain Pokeballs that like had a character with a clip on it that you could put on your backpack. Yeah, all of them.
The bouncy balls with a Pikachu in it for some reason. I regrettably sold mine.
Who did I pick? Like as a kid?
Starter, yeah.
I picked Charmander at the time, but now I picked Bulbasaur.
Fine.
I picked Bulbasaur. Okay, I have a good reason for picking Bulbasaur now, though. It's the fastest grass type in Gen 1. So it gets a sleep powder move, and it's extremely fast, which makes it really good for the Gen 1 metagame.
Thank you. I have a poster I bring to conventions that says the smartest kids pick Bulbasaur.
Well, that's accurate. Yeah.
Right? And now you're the smartest kid. You had some learning to do.
Exactly.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off your talk about the keychains.
That's all good.
I got excited. Someone wants to know online, do any modern games interest you in a similar way to Pokemon?
I think that's tough because, part of the appeal of Pokemon is that it's something I grew up with. So I can sort of return to something that was very comforting to me during a hard part of my life. So I think video games just don't play the same role in my life as they did back then.
That's fair. Yeah. Another question from online. When you make YouTube videos, do you look at other YouTubers for inspiration?
Kind of. I try not to look at videos of other people who are in my niche, which sounds weird, but I don't want to be looking at what other people are doing and then thinking, oh, I can't do that. So-and-so's already done it. So I don't want to put myself in a box too much. So I try and avoid other Pokemon or video game content creators, but I do watch like lots of other content creators and I'll like be inspired, even if it's not the same topic, by like their creative choices and things like that. Yeah.
That absolutely makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always good to take inspiration from things outside of what you're doing. It's what it'll only make what you're doing like better and I don't know, feel more well lived. I don't know. I think there's a better term for that.
More well-rounded. Yeah. For sure.
I think not enough people realize that when they're creating anything. Don't just like. And I can only talk in terms of like animation, where if someone's like they want to say make some anime inspired and they're only just taking inspiration from anime, you gotta pull your inspiration from other aspects of life too. So, and I guess that applies to YouTube.
I think it all seeps into the work too. I mean, I think subconsciously having a full life, you read that in a human being. You know?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, some game-related questions for you. When you start building a team of Pokemon, how do you go about team building and selecting them? Based on what do you choose your Pokemon for your team of 6?
Well, a lot of my content lately is kind of explaining that process.
Oh, so, great. Okay.
Yeah, I've got several hours worth of videos I can point you towards.
Perfect. Okay, so that's your answer, whoever asked that online. Another question we got was, what were your most difficult shiny Pokemon hunts?
Oh, all the ones in Gen 2. I did a lot of full odds, so shiny Pokemon are really rare. It's like 1 in 8,000 something chance in the wild. There's ways you can like kind of cut down the odds to make it easier, but a lot of what I was doing when I was playing Gen 2 recently was I was just like loading up the game, encountering the Pokemon, not shiny. I turn it off, turn it back on, encounter it again. So some of those hunts actually like took literally years. Like,
oh my God.
Yeah. Like Suicune was a long one because there's a whole cutscene before you can like actually go in and fight it. So you have to save before the cutscene. So yeah, that took a long time.
Yeah, that's labor intensive.
It is, but it's something you probably do mindlessly, like as you're multitasking and watching something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what do you watch? Like, so if you are playing a game, like what is Tama watching on TV? Like, is it anime related or is it something totally different?
A lot of sitcoms. Like if I watch a lot of like Arrested Development and Friends and The Office, that sort of thing. If I'm just trying to like distract myself with something while I'm resetting for something in a game, yeah.
Right. I mean, that's interesting you say that too, because when I talk to people, like I've seen those shows you mentioned so many times now that to me, those are like Pokemon to, I think, the people I meet.
Right.
So that's how I equate it. Like I can do 10 things while I'm watching The Office because I've seen every episode 60 billion times. And I know those shows better than probably the cast. Yeah. So when someone says to me like, oh, in episode 6, when you said blah, I go, I promise you know it more than I do. And I apologize for that. But if you ask me about Seinfeld, I'll give you an answer. And I feel bad, but I also don't know that I could have a healthy relationship with watching Pokemon.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I'd want to redo everything. Okay, some more online questions for you. This one says it's not exactly 4Kids related, but often mistaken as a 4Kids property. What did you think of Card Captors?
Oh, I loved Card Captors. I actually have a couple DVDs of the Card Captors dub.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was probably not as good a production as 4Kids. No shade, but it's a little bit more awkward, the dub of Card Captors, but they also change a lot more from the source material. And it's kind of a difficult show to adapt. So, yeah, but I did really like Card Captors. I had like, again, with the role-playing toys, I had like the wand and the cards, yeah.
How organized is your collection?
My games kind of. I've got this nice unit behind me. I have my consoles all set up in like printer drawers down here, and yeah.
Well, they're a certain shape. That's easier. Like when we're talking like figures and all that. Like
That's
how
tough.
crazy is it? Yeah.
Yeah. I have a shelf in my closet that is like 3 tiers of. And all the figures just sit on it because you can't put them in like boxes or anything, or they'll get broken. And yeah it's kind of chaotic.
Which is kind of the best collection, I think. Something I want to end with is, and one of the listeners asked this, what did you think of Ash Ketchum becoming the champion? I mean, this is much more emotional for you and for certain people who grew up with this than it was for a lot of us.
Yeah. For me, I kind of made my peace with Pokemon a long time ago, the show, because when the voice actors switched, that really upset me as a kid. I was really attached to Veronica as Ash and Rachel as Misty. And, at the time, there was a lot of that external pressure to like grow out of Pokemon. And I kind of felt like I was not being rewarded for that when they were switching all the voice actors.
Your loyalty.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of when I came to terms with like, okay, this show is really not for me. Like this is cyclical. This is my first taste of like kids TV where every 4 years it's for a new group of kids because kids are, they move on.
Right. Yeah.
So, so I guess I kind of like didn't expect them to do like a nice send off for Ash. And I was like pleasantly surprised that they did and that they kept the original audience in mind. But at that point, I was like, my expectations were on the floor. So,
Yeah, that it is there is something to that. And sometimes the people we interview on the show do talk about wanting to reward that loyalty of the fans, like even in the toys they create or the merch or the storylines. I think it took a while for them to realize the longevity of this property. And once they really did, that's when the people who were loyal fans maybe got to feel it a little more. But I don't think anyone knew we'd be talking about it 25 years later. So
there was doubt. There was a doubt for a while. I mean, I think around that time when the voice cast changed too, it was that they thought like, Pokemania was over. And it just kind of was dormant. I guess it scaled back a little bit. And now look, I think it's bigger than it ever was, especially in that initial time. I'm curious, Tara, because you're a generation ahead of us. Like,
remind me, yeah, thanks. Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, what young man?
All I'm
What would
asking
you
is
to know?
do you think like we're like, you know, the first generation to really kind of take our like childhood and our nostalgia and just it stayed with us? Because Tom was like mentioned a bunch of times, like there's that pressure to grow up. But I think like, and that was still very prevalent when we were young, but especially now, it's like, I think there's less and less of that. It's just now you got adults playing Pokemon Go and all that. Like, do you think like amongst your peers, are there people that are still talking about cartoons they were watching?
You're right. Like I just was actually talking to someone about this over the weekend that that your generation is more nostalgia heavy in that way. And I don't know what it is. And I don't know, again, there's something in the water or there's something in the parenting or whatever it is. Or maybe it could be as simple as 9/11 and people growing up through that and needing a comfort food or whatever it is specific to that generation. But my friends and I definitely have our touchstones of like, you know, I have a lot of good friends were into the Golden Girls. Like we have our nostalgia. It's not necessarily cartoons. And that could have to do with maybe the content we were watching. It didn't stick with us the same way. Muppets have that for me, though. Like there was something about the Muppets that spoke to me. And when I see those, I get the feels. But it is a generational thing. And that's why I've been trying to find the right psychiatrist or psychologist to really understand this phenomenon of nostalgia, because there's got to be a serotonin factor involved. And I'm not smart enough to know.
I would love to hear. There has to be at this point someone from my generation who is both a big Pokemon fan and like a child psychologist. There's got to be someone out there.
A friend of mine was they're meeting a new doctor to a child psychologist for their kid. And when they went into the office, there was a Bulbasaur on the desk. And they had to tell me because they were like, oh, my God, this is the perfect doctor. We know Bulbasaur. And I was like, well, the doctor probably thought you were crazy when you said you knew Bulbasaur. But I think, again, it goes back to the artwork. And I wanted to ask you if you are still drawing and how your drawing has changed and evolved over the years, because I go back to this artwork.
Yeah, that was very exciting to me as a kid because I loved to draw characters from the shows I was watching. Like the Powerpuff Girls were so easy, circles. Mm-hmm. And but anime was much more challenging, and it took me a long time to kind of learn to mimic that style. And I'm probably much worse at it than I was as a kid when I was drawing constantly on all of my schoolwork. Because I'm not really sitting and idly doodling as much. But yeah, it's still a very beautiful show. I think that especially looking at like the old hand-drawn animation of the original series and some of the beautiful painted backgrounds, it's something you just kind of don't see anywhere else.
I want to encourage people again to watch your early videos with your artwork because it drew me in, and because it was so personal. It felt so personal. And
that's not always easy on the internet to kind of just be upfront and open like that. So I do applaud you for sharing your story, and it's a beautiful story. Yes,
yeah.
People need to see it.
Oh, thank you.
Tara put in the show notes.
Show notes. All this is. Please send me whatever links you think our listeners will want, and we'll make sure they're all in the show notes. But a big subplot of this, and we'll wrap up with this, a big subplot of this podcast is living a creative life. And whatever that means to you, like, and you've done it in such an interesting and beautiful way where it probably didn't take the exact path you wanted it to or you thought it would, but you did it. And it's not always exactly perfect or whatever it is, but how lucky are the three of us that we are living creative lives?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it just takes persistence. If it's something that's really important to you, and even if it's not something that you can see being lucrative or being a living, you can make it happen. You just have to really commit to it, you know?
Yeah. Make it a priority, even again, if it's not your main job, but have a job then where you give yourself the free time to draw or sing or just create, whatever it is. Oh, you are so Great. Thank you for spending time with us today, Tama Hero.
Thanks for having me. I wrote down some questions for you guys.
Oh,
and maybe
that's
you can
please.
save for like future guests.
Yes.
To get more dirt for your podcast. So,
oh my gosh, I love this.
Okay, so my first question was, why wasn't the original Japanese version of the show available, like on DVD?
Okay.
Like, I remember in some of the interviews you were doing, they were saying that they were worried about it, like being a Japanese show and not doing well, like Sailor Moon. But then after it was established and it was doing well, they could have done that. So I wanted to know why that wasn't done.
It's a great question. I'm trying to think who would remember the answer, because there's people who definitely would have known the answer at the time. It's a matter of thinking who has the best memory. And I think I know who to ask. Okay.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And then so when I was in middle school and as I was kind of getting older, I got kind of more interested in the relationship between Ash and Misty. And in the original Japanese version, she has like kind of a little crush on him and he's very oblivious. But then in the dub, there was a bunch of original material like Pokemon Live and the Christmas Bash CD and all those additional like songs that were done.
Listen to that. Yes.
But they kind of play it up a lot more. And I wanted to know like why that was and whose decision that was and what motivated it.
Right, because it seems like in the American properties, they leaned into that.
They did, yeah,
but they
for
didn't
sure.
And maybe that just is as simple as that's such an American thing at that time, like the crushes and but we see plenty of that in Japanese anime too. So that is an interesting question. But I heard it on the Christmas CD recently, and I was like, oh, ooh, wait, I don't want to think about them.
Yeah.
Weird.
Also, I wondered if it was like maybe the people who were making like the new material for the show weren't quite sure what to do with Misty as a character. Like since she was a girl in kind of like a more male driven series, if maybe they thought like she would fit like kind of pigeonholed into the niche of like the girl love interest.
Right, because does it diminish her then to make her that? Like, that's what I wonder. If the minute you start making her the love interest, does it diminish her as a strong female character?
Yeah, that wasn't really something that I was worried about at 13. I was fascinated by it and I wanted them to get together when I was that age. And of course, I didn't occur to me then that you probably can't have two 10-year-olds get together in a TV show. But yeah.
But Brock wasn't that much older and he was hitting on everybody.
And Brock was having
that's
no
true.
luck. No.
Yeah.
No luck.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to know if you know that your voice is in a figure. They made Hasbro made a talking Bulbasaur figure, electronic talking Bulbasaur. I wanted to know if you knew about that.
Is it it's not this, is it?
No.
'Cause my voice was in this.
Oh, it is.
I'm holding up a circle and you hit this. I found this when I was in London traveling many years ago. It doesn't work anymore because it's a million years old. So this is the one you're thinking of?
Well, no, but I didn't know about that one. So
okay.
I think it's akin to like, cause what the first ones they did were like the Pikachu. That's back when Pikachu had like the white, nuzzle, but like white tip nose, and I think the other one was Meowth, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think I remember seeing a Bulbasaur one.
I looked it up just to make sure that they did make one, and they did.
Okay.
It's not very common.
Interesting. We were not told when our voices were put into toys back at that time. I happened to find this one in a store one day, and I had no idea they had used it. Today, the Pokemon company always pays for those kinds of things. It's much more above board. But yeah, our voices were used all over the place without us knowing back then.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. You live, you learn. I mean, we were young and we signed not great contracts back then, which we talk about, which I'm fine talking about because they've made it right in recent, in recent years. So,
I mean, I guess when I was hearing you guys talk about that on the podcast, I was kind of, not that I think that you shouldn't share it, because I think it's good to know. But it did make me sad to think that the people who made something that's so important to me were not treated well. Yeah.
Yeah, bummer, but again, it has a better ending. And the fact that we get to the silver lining is these conventions, and that we get, not only is it compensation, which is definitely part of it, but it is the interactions we have. And it makes up for a lot of that. I mean, the most special moments of my life have honestly been connecting with children and adults who this was a meaningful thing to. And especially people like you, again, who've made a career and a life out of a lot of this stuff. And I know you're more than just that, but that's what propelled you. And that's so cool to me that I could be a little cog in that wheel. So, yeah.
And then I guess along those lines, the last question that I have written down is, so 4Kids was kind of involved in licensing merchandise based on the show. And then they also kind of adapted products that already existed in Japan. So I guess I was wondering who decided which Pokemon would be on merchandise back then? And if that was like something 4Kids had any control over, because a lot of the American merchandise from that time period has really random Pokemon on it.
Yes, Steve asked the licensing person about that. And because, Steve, I think it was a fast food thing. You said, why did they use, and you named one of these random Pokemon.
Was it Poliwhirl?
I think so.
Because I know that's like been like, there's a lot of discussion online how like Poliwhirl, I think maybe that's more on the Japanese side, was pushed as like a possible like mascot before it was like they really gave Pikachu the ball and ran with it. I think because we talked about there was like the Kraft macaroni and cheese shapes. There was the cereal, because you had like an oddish marshmallow.
Right. So sometimes it was
Tara.
whatever, like the licensing interview we did, sometimes it was whatever was easiest to adapt into that. If it was a toy or something, like Oddish made a good marshmallow shape. Things like that. Sometimes it was that simple. Because I remember I got the box of cereal. I'm like, oh, bummer, there's no Bulbasaur, but at least there's an Oddish. But Bulbasaur, I think, would have looked more like a blob as a marshmallow. So sometimes
That's fair.
It was also marketing, and they would see what worked and what didn't. We were told by the licensing person that I was so excited to hear that you loved your Ash toy, because they told us that things with the characters from the show did not sell as well as the Pokemon themselves. So they stopped producing as much with like Ash or Brock or whatever, unless there was a Pikachu with them, or unless there was the character with them. It was simply just sales numbers. But you're right. Then sometimes it did feel arbitrary. You're like, how'd you pick that one? But I think it was like trial and error. And yeah. And they were like, what's sold? What's, I mean, again, it's a company. It comes down to dollars, unfortunately.
All right. Well, that's good to know. I was trying to catch up on the show to make sure that I wouldn't ask things that had already been answered.
That's
No, it's all
fine.
good.
But,
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing your homework.
Yeah.
I mean, I really appreciate that. I think you're the first guest to have questions for us, and I love it.
Oh, I'm glad. And I hope that you talk to other fans, because Pokemon is such a huge series and there's so many different facets of it.
Yeah.
And there's some people who really love like the show, and some people who like the video games more, and there's people who like the card game. And I actually know a couple of people I can recommend that you get in touch with.
We love that. We would love your list. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great.
But you were a delight. I'm so glad that we got to meet virtually, and thank you so much for your time.
Oh, this was really wonderful, and I'm very grateful that you had me on. And yeah, I'm going to keep listening to the rest of the show.
Tama Hero was the sweetest and bestest and greatest. That was really cool to hear a very different perspective on all of this stuff.
Delight. And yeah, like our first fan, not necessarily someone involved in the industry or a past employee of 4Kids. So like a little experiment here for the show. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you reminisced with a fellow fan, all you Pokemaniacs out there.
It made me wish I had played the game at the time. It really did.
It was truly something special. I gotta say. I think.
Yeah.
I feel like the internet now has made things too easy, and I think is like kind of.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yep.
It results in a little less imagination, I think, at least on my part, I could say that. Like, I think I used to draw a lot because you didn't have images on hand. You didn't easily have access. Like, if I wanted to draw something like a scene from something I liked in a show or a movie, I had to, have it on tape and pause on the TV and then just look at it and draw it instead of just, screen capping it in VLC player on my computer now. And with Pokemon, it was just truly, it felt like it was a shared experience, but at the same time, it was what you made it for yourself. And talking about that earlier with how it was a franchise where you could insert yourself into it instead of just, assuming the role. Like, you weren't like, oh, I'm Batman or I'm Superman. It's just like, no, you could be yourself and be like, this is my Pokemon partner. This is my team.
Yeah. I'm a trainer from this city, and you make up a city name.
I'm curious to see what it's like being a kid today growing up with Pokemon, or kids from like 10 years ago who were growing up watching, say, like the black and white era of Pokemon. I'm just curious. I would love to see a comparison to like the 90s kids and then like the 2000s kids and the 2010s kids.
Right. And did they start with episode 1, or did they jump in at, you know what I mean? I'm curious, like, I think it depends on the parent, and sometimes it's whatever was available on whatever streaming service or cable.
It's definitely more accessible.
So
I'm curious if like the Pokeheads of the younger generations, if they're like, I'm going to go back and start from the beginning of the show.
Well, I know some parents who did, but like recently my friend called and she wanted to put me on the phone with her friend's kid, and she's like, do the Bulbasaur voice. And then she's like, so I did it, and the kid was happy. But then she's like, this kid only watches these years. Like, the kid clearly had not started from 1, which I feel like those are such magical times. Like, even if you just start with those and then jump ahead, there's something about Indigo League that's so, and maybe it's just my own talking, but
you're not wrong. I think it's definitely a bit of rose-tinted glasses. But also I think, Tama talked about this too. It's like going back and watch these old episodes, hearing that original Japanese score, which is orchestral, seeing those hand-painted backgrounds, the hand-animated, scenes, and like on cells. It's and I'm also very nostalgic for this era of anime dubbing, because I think, and not knocking anything current today, it's amazing how far we've come in anime dubbing, but there's something about like the campiness of that era where it was just I think it was just taking more chances and some liberties here and there that I miss, which is ironic coming from the guy who talked about how much the One Piece, the 4Kids One Piece dub made him want to scream.
Interesting how the cookie crumbles. Interesting. And again, like, I think as an actor, I don't like to hear myself be that big and campy. And I think because I think part of, and this is just kind of inside the industry a little more, I think as a voice actor, we didn't get taken as seriously back then because we did anime and they knew stylistically it was different. So I had to work very hard to be taken seriously in other forms of animation.
I could say it was similar, trying to like become just an artist in general, but especially like a comic book artist or even an animator. Like the anime manga style was looked down upon by a lot of people, and
interesting.
How the times they are quite different.
But for the better, so that's good. I like hearing that. All right, I guess it is too late for me to become a hardcore gamer. The one game I would maybe pick up is Pokemon Snap. I feel like I would.
I don't think it's ever too late. I think video games are such like a integral part of just our society and our culture now. I don't think it's ever too late.
I'd want to play the original Zelda that I played on my original Nintendo.
The very first one?
That was my weakness. Oh,
there's an audience for that. You like the retro game audience?
Well, actually, we didn't get into that with Tama. I wanted to let her go, but she's doing. I mean, and again, we'll post all the links, but she's doing a lot of retro game stuff now, and yeah, I think you guys listening will really dig that. Yeah, she's
once
awesome.
Again, go check out her YouTube channel. Go follow her wherever.
And all the places. I'm going to make sure to do a comprehensive list of links for her. So, Steve, have we said it all?
I was going to say we've done it all, but no, we're not done yet. We'll be back here. We'll be back here next week.
And what will we do when we're back here next? Okay, check the show notes and all that stuff. But what will we do when we're back here next week?
Catch you next time.
4Kids Flashback is a production of Maji Media, hosted by Tara Sands and Steve Yurko.
Producers are Zach Logan, Tara Sands, and Steve Yurko.
For more information, go to 4kidsflashback.com. That is the number 4. And if you worked at 4Kids and have a story you want to share, please email us at 4kidsflashback@gmail.com.
You can find us on social media at 4Kids Flashback, and to listen early and ad-free, head to patreon.com/4kidsflashback. For podcast merchandise, find links on our website and Linktree.
As they say on every podcast, if you liked this show, please subscribe, rate, and review, and tell your friends, or 4. If you want to check out other Maji Media podcasts, go to Maji, MAJI.media. Thanks for listening.